My stepdad tried to kick me out to make room for the baby, not knowing I own the house. Now they're panicking. Hello Reddit I plus here. So, let me set the scene for you. I'm 26 years old, and I've been living in this cozy little house for the past few years. It's not extravagant or anything, but it's mine. I inherited it from my grandpa when he passed away. He was an incredible man, worked hard all his life, and left me this house because we had a special bond. I was his favorite. Don't tell my cousins that. They'd lose it. Anyway, life was peaceful. I had a steady job, a comfortable setup, and everything felt stable. Enter my mom and her husband, aka my stepdad. Let's call him Rick, because honestly, he's the definition of a Rick. Now, I've never been super close to Rick. He married my mom about 5 years ago, and let's just say we didn't exactly hit it off. He's one of those guys who has a comment for everything. You know the type. Always needs to be in control, thinks he's smarter than everyone else, and treats me like I'm some clueless kid just because I'm younger. So last year, they fell on hard times. Rick lost his job, and they couldn't afford their apartment anymore. My mom called me, practically in tears, asking if they could move in temporarily until they got back on their feet. Of course I said yes. I mean, it's my mom. How could I say no? For the first few weeks, things were fine. Rick kept to himself, and my mom was her usual sweet self. But then, Rick started acting like he owned the place. He'd make comments like, "This living room would look better if we moved the couch over there," or, "Why don't we get rid of this old coffee table? It's so outdated." I bit my tongue at first because, hey, they were going through a tough time, but it kept escalating. Then came the rules. Yes, you heard that right. Rules. One day, Rick sat me down like we were having some kind of family meeting. He goes, "Listen, it's time we set some boundaries. We need to establish a cleaning schedule, and I think it's fair that everyone contributes to the groceries." I stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Rick, this is my house," I said, trying to stay calm. He waved it off like I'd said something ridiculous. "Yeah, but we're all living here now, so it's about mutual respect." The audacity, right? But wait, it gets better. A few months go by, and one evening my mom drops the bombshell. She's pregnant. Now, don't get me wrong, I was happy for her. A baby is exciting news. But Rick? Oh, Rick's ego inflated to the size of a hot air balloon. Suddenly, he's talking about turning my guest room into a nursery. My guest room, the one I use as an office. He didn't even ask, just announced it like it was already decided. When I pushed back, he got snippy. "We're having a baby. You're an adult. You should think about moving out soon anyway." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Rick actually started dropping not-so-subtle hints that I should leave to make room for their growing family. He'd say stuff like, "You're young. You should get your own place," or, "It's time for you to be independent." The irony? He was unemployed and living in my house rent-free. At first, I didn't say anything. I figured my mom would set him straight. But nope. She was caught up in the excitement of the baby and didn't seem to notice how out of line Rick was being. Then came the final straw. One morning, Rick cornered me in the kitchen and said, "Look, we've decided it's time for you to move out. You've had a good run here, but we need the space." I blinked at him, trying to process what I'd just heard. "You've decided?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He crossed his arms and nodded. "Yeah, it's for the best. We'll give you 2 months to find a place." Now, let me tell you, I've never felt rage like that in my life. But instead of blowing up, I just smiled and said, "Okay, Rick, let's have a family meeting tonight." He looked smug, like he thought he'd won. That evening, we all sat down in the living room. Rick was acting like some kind of patriarch, sitting back with his arms crossed, while my mom looked a little nervous. I started by saying, "So, I understand you guys think I should move out." Rick jumped in. "It's for the baby. We need the room." I nodded slowly, pretending to consider his point. Then I dropped the hammer. "You do realize this is my house, right?" The color drained from Rick's face. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out the deed, the literal deed to the house, with my name on it. "Grandpa left this house to me. I own it. Legally." The room went dead silent. My mom looked like she wanted to disappear, and Rick. He started stammering, trying to backtrack. "Well, we didn't mean it like that. We were just, talking about what's best for everyone." I wasn't having it. "Rick, you've been acting like the king of the castle in a house that doesn't even belong to you. You've disrespected me, tried to boss me around, and now you're telling me to leave. If anyone's leaving, it's you." My mom tried to intervene, but I held up my hand. Mom, I love you and you're welcome to stay. But Rick, he's out. I'll give you 2 months to figure things out. Rick tried to argue, but I wasn't budging. I stood up and walked out, leaving them sitting there in stunned silence. The next 2 months were awkward, to say the least. Rick avoided me like the plague, and my mom kept apologizing, saying she had no idea he'd been so out of line. Eventually, they moved out to a small apartment across town. My mom still visits, and we're on good terms. Rick? Let's just say he learned a valuable lesson about biting the hand that feeds you. Or, in this case, the landlord who owns the roof over your head. And me? I'm living my best life, sipping coffee in my living room, with my couch, in my house.